Welcome back to how I fixed World of Warcraft for a TTRPG. If this is your first video, this is how I rebooted the world of Azeroth and beyond for a tabletop RPG campaign I'm running on Discord with a couple of friends. One of my primary goals was to rebuild things, to make it a more believable world, and also to make it serve a TTRPG better, as well as the specific needs of my players. We're going through the Eastern Kingdoms lately, and as we make our way south, we're finally starting to get out of the human territories. Not quite yet, though, at least not at the start, because I promised to talk more about the race that had a very profound impact on the lore, and yet is very sidelined these days. I'm of course talking about the Forest Trolls. Back during WarCraft 2, they had a very important during WarCraft 2, they had a very important role. This, I don't know why this is so hard to say. They had a very important role, being one of the major parts of the old Horde. Even back then, we knew trolls had some sort of ancient history with humankind that wasn't quite explained. Of course, we've learned a lot about that since. The Troll Wars were introduced, showing the ancient history of humankind, where large chunks of Lordaeron were owned by forest trolls, and the young human tribes were expanding across it. Humans had a tough time fighting the trolls until they were helped out by the High Elves, who taught the first 100 human mages. I have to say, a part of me wants to see an RTS, or at least a campaign set during the Troll Wars. And someone probably made one on Hive Workshop. I just haven't checked it in ages, except for snooping on 3D models to make VTT tokens for my TTRPG. The ancient conflict of humanity fighting an inhuman race for their survival, it certainly rings some mythical bells. However, we haven't really seen much of the Forest Trolls since then. Ever since WarCraft 3 really shifted its attention to jungle trolls, they were really the main focus of the attention ever since. I don't hate jungle trolls, but I kind of miss that we just left behind this huge chunk of the lore. The forest trolls are supposed to have a whole kingdom set near Quel'Thalas and Lordaeron. Zul'aman should be the size of a whole zone with several areas inside it mentioned in the lore, like the Maysara Hills or the Temple of Ulatek. Yet in World of Warcraft we virtually don't see the zone at all. All we got was the city of Zul'aman as a dungeon, twice, and a couple of outlying villages. It didn't really let us see much of their history and culture. I do have a quiet hope that it will be added as a full zone at midnight, but it's not a very high hope. I fear they will focus entirely on the elves and shaft the trolls again. Or just make Zul'aman a dungeon for the third time. What I did in my TTRPG started below Zul'aman. Long story short, the main plot for one season was the Dark Below, or Azj'Aqir, the tunnels and caves the Aqir dug out underneath all of the old Kalimdor in the ancient times. One of the final zones we encountered there was what I called Rush-Aman. These ancient caverns underneath Zul'aman were once made by the Aqir, before the trolls killed Kith'ix, the Citraxi leading them, buried him beneath the city. To make sure the ancient evil doesn't return, many trolls were buried with the Aqir and sealed in there, awaiting a time to wake up again as undead and keep the Aqir down if they ever rise back up. By the time you arrived in Rush-Aman, the Aqir were waking up, and with the help of Prophet Skitra, corrupted some of the troll guardians. Then Kith'ix was raised and burst out of the ground in the middle of the troll capital. Our main campaign continued to follow him to the surface and fight through the city against both trolls like Hexlord Malakras, who were trying to use the dark power, Kith'ix being revealed as that darkest Loa that Malakras used to empower himself, and the aberrations themselves. While doing that, we actually freed Zul'jin, whom Malakras and Warlord Jinzak imprisoned, and helped him take control of Zul'aman back. Then we proceeded to fight Kith'ix himself, with little help from our own divine patron, to even the odds. And while it does sound like making Zul'aman a dungeon again, on the side we were also exploring more of Zul'aman, including revealing Ulatek as an Aqir Colossus. I do want to eventually maybe return to Zul'aman and do more with it that doesn't depend on those cosmic events, but there are no huge plans right now. We do have Zul'jin back in power, and he's not being too actively hostile due to being helped by our outside adventurers. And they are, of course, not sacrificing their own gods for power, because I don't know how it became the main thing for trolls to do all the time. They did it once in Zul'Gurub, and then it just spiraled out of that. It's just the thing trolls do now. It's people sacrificing their own gods for power. Why is that even a thing that's okay? It's a cool topic. Okay, it's a cool theme. It's a cool, but it happened too many times. Just with the trolls. Why is that a thing? You know. Anyway. While they haven't done much visible in the game since, they will probably rejoin the Horde eventually, especially since the Blood Wolves aren't in it. The other major race I wanted to talk about today is the Dwarves. If you look just at the maps, they occupy a huge chunk of the Eastern Kingdoms, but people forget about their importance all the time. I didn't change much about their origins or history. They still mostly woke up in Uldaman with no memory of how they got there, having been the earthen turned into beings of flesh by the old god's curse. And eventually, centuries later, they fought the devastating War of the Three Hammers, which ends up with the summoning of Ragnaros, putting dwarves at the start of our game in much the same place they were in Vanilla WoW. Now, I originally had huge plans for the dwarves. One of my original plans involved a whole season, a whole series of adventures for several months, devoted to what amounted to a new War of the Three Hammers. Since when we were starting, Moira hasn't been kidnapped yet, the adventure would kick off with that event. The plan was, the characters would be doing something unrelated in Ironforge, when there's suddenly what appears to be a Wildhammer attack in the city. They presumably help fight it off, and end up in a scuffle with Logi Grimstone, whose brother Harken they killed previously, but Moira has already been taken by then. What was supposed to follow from there was a series of adventures investigating those events. Well, we know from the old timeline it was the Dark Irons that kidnapped Moira. We can never be sure what changed in the new timeline. Magni ends up waging war on the Wildhammers. We get involved in that, help discover Grimstone was in league with the Dark Irons, and in truth, she had been taken to Blackrock. After a few months, the adventure culminates in going to Blackrock depths, and either fighting Dagran Thorazan to free Moira, or finding common ground with it, by finding out about him wanting to break away from Ragnaros, giving the players a chance to change history. From there, we probably continue to Molten Core and fight Ragnaros, and send him back to Firelands. But plans change, and that didn't happen in our game in the end. To salvage the ideas, we did a small side quest where the initial triggering event still happened, that we followed Moira's kidnappers through the Deeprun Trum and fought them there, freeing her. As she tries to lead us off somewhere, we learn that she's already in love with Thorazan and tries to get us killed a few times before finally learning that's not working out for her. In the end, against all odds, we manage to do the unthinkable and convince Magni that Thorazan isn't the real bad guy here, and that two kings strike a secret alliance meant to undermine Ragnaros and his power over the cultists in Shadowforge City. We haven't dealt with Ragnaros yet. I need to find the right time and place for that, but we prevented much of the dwarven drama from the original timeline. We did, however, end up stumbling into Dark Irons in the dark below. I created a zone called the Core Ward, located roughly underneath the Burning Steps and the Searing Gorge, with much the same aesthetic as the Molten Core. There were many Dark Iron settlements there, as well as a race of deep gnomes I invented for the Dark Below, basing them on the Svirfneblin of D&D, of course. In that adventure, we ended up meeting some Dark Irons who threw their lot with the Black Dragon Bazalthar, who made his lair there, and made New Skaarden. Can we talk about Skaarden for a moment? Well, they weren't exactly a huge part of the lore that many people eagerly awaited. We still almost had them in the game once or twice. I thought an idea of some mutated race of dwarves was cool and unique idea that I wanted to see them in the game. And then we got them in the War Within, and they were earthen with horns and shadow magic. That's not what the Skaarden looked like. So our garden looked more like their old concept art. They were draconic and had those special crossbows they had in the books, even when they showed up in Azj'Aqir eventually. We did do a small war with Entai, and that's a whole different story. Here's another important person we found in Coreward. While exploring the area, we found some scaffolding where the dark irons appeared to be making the elementium plates meant for Deathwing's back. Turns out that was actually Deathwing buried in the ground. And we woke him up too early. Whoops! Remember when he was once said to be hiding somewhere deep underneath Grim Battle? Yeah, that's this place. Not Deep Home in this timeline, and he would be breaking out above the place we were in, meaning north of Stormwind, where he was originally supposed to break out before plans changed in Cataclysm, and he somehow ended up in Deep Home. Deep Home is weird in so many ways, and it's treated like it's physically within the world, but at the same time it's a different dimension, and I will not go into this right now, but it is a long topic. Good news is, his son Bazalthar didn't want him to wake up either. While he was still an evil black dragon, he knew Deathwing would bring about the Cataclysm, and nobody there wanted that expansion to happen again, especially since we already had Worgen and goblins. Bazalthar preferred the feuding, scheming human kingdoms and offered a way out. He sent us to the Molten Core, physically connected to Coreward, and also the obstacle that divided these Dark Irons from the ones in Blackrock, to kill one of Ragnaros's lieutenants to make a special Elementium rod which could, with Bazalthar's help, put Deathwing back to sleep before he breaks out. We did that, and ended up having to fight High Justice Grimstone, who opposed the dragons there, and in the end resealed Deathwing and Coreward. For now, at least. This is pretty much as far as the Dwarven and Forest Troll plots went in our game, and besides the plan to somehow deal with Ragnaros eventually, there aren't any huge plans for more right now. What you need to know about our game is that all this happened a few years ago for us, and the game has moved on and changed a lot since then, exploring entirely new continents by now, and crossing over with many other universes to adapt into our system. While we still return to the old plots from time to time, closing up old plot threads and preventing future disasters, they aren't our main focus anymore. That's enough about where our game is going, since I know what most of you really want to hear is how the places and people you know are doing, and how they should be doing in the main continuity. This is it for the Dwarves and Trolls, and perhaps as we keep journeying south, next time we return to more human action and finally get to see what Stormwind was up to. And there is a lot to talk about. Do you want to hear more about the Dwarves or Trolls, or any specific plotlines or characters? What do you want to hear about when we're talking about Stormwind? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, I don't have a Patreon, but you can do it on my Ko-fi page linked in the video description below. And I hope to see you next time.